Hey. Welcome back to the PHNX Mercury podcast. I am your host, Erika Day, and I'm joined by Mr. Stephen today. How we doing? How's this week going for you?
I'm blessed. I'm blessed. We got to see some exciting basketball last night. I'm looking forward to talking about it all with you. How you feeling? How you living? What's going on with you?
I'm amped. Honestly, I'm pretty excited to just be back in the Footprint Center tomorrow. As much fun as it was to watch the Mercury beat the Aces in Vegas, it would have been a lot more fun to do it in Phoenix. So I'm excited to see the squad again tomorrow.
I definitely hear you on that. It would have been, especially that game, that would have been a lot of fun to see in person against that team with that specific player going off the way that she did again, which we'll be getting to because the entire W world revolves around her right now. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that. We'll get into that. But before we do, I just want to remind everybody, don't forget to hit like button, leave us a comment, give us a chat in that chat today. I'm trying to hear from you guys. Let me know what you're thinking about the Mercury, especially given the performance we saw yesterday. Please let us know. And like I said, leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast and subscribe to PHNX. But with that, let's get into it a little bit. Yeah. So
Talk about it.
after the Mercury beat the Aces yesterday, that leaves the Mercury at 2-1 on the season, and technically speaking, tied for first in the West. So, Stephen, what does that mean for this team this early?
I think all of those things matter for this team early. That means that they are off to a start that speaks to a team that's really putting it together, having so much newness. Everybody's bought in. And rather than them having to go through the growing pains or struggles that could typically be assumed a team like this will have to go through early in the season, they're kind of hitting the ground running in a sense. And again, we talk about all of the things they've done at their foundation to build where they are right now. We're starting to see it all kind of play out in real time.
I've got some friends that are really heavy into the WNBA Twitter, and all of them are messaging me last night being like, oh my gosh, the Mercury are the real deal. And I'm like, you guys have been sleeping. I've been telling y'all for 2 or 3 weeks now that this is a real deal and you need to wake up to the Phoenix Mercury. And I think yesterday was the kind of tipping point to some of the non-believers waking up.
My only response to that is like a four-parter. Wake them up, Kai. Wake them up, Tosh. Wake them up, Diana. Wake them up, Beck. Wake them up, Sophie. Wake them up, Brittany. Wake them up, Nate. Wake them up. Wake them
We
up.
can't leave the Mack truck out of this, okay?
Wake them
This
up, Tosh. Yes,
and on the
yes.
You know what? Before we even get into Miss Kahleah Copper's performance, I want to give a special shout out to Morgan Birch because I've been sleeping on her a little bit. And when she blocked Asia Wilson's shot yesterday, I actually had to leave the room for a second because I needed to compose myself. Like, what planet are we on? We must be on Mercury for real, you know?
Yeah, Morgan has that unassuming look to her game. You might think she's just out there to hold down a couple of minutes. She's more than capable of knocking down a couple of 3-pointers, making some some plays, some playmaking from the inside of the arc, and also doing things on defense. She's a former track athlete, and she also led her college in men's and women's in scoring. So she can do some things on a basketball court that you might not necessarily think that she can just off of initial optics. She's a player that can definitely make some things happen, and she's gonna have a role for this team once they grow back whole for sure. So yeah, definitely shout out Morgan. And she's only been back for a week, or yeah, I think a week now actually. She got back
Yeah.
just in time for the first game of the regular season. So yeah.
You know what? And while we're at it, let me just give a shout out to the whole bench because let's see, the bench had 21.
27.
Yeah, compared to the Aces whopping 2 points off of the bench yesterday. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not trying to say that the starters couldn't do it for the Aces, but the bench did it for the Mercury yesterday. They really were the difference maker in this game.
Yes. You talk about a team. One of the best ways, especially when you're going against a heavy hitter like the Las Vegas Aces, to chip away at any type of deficits that might come over the course of a game is with your reserves. At some point, that starting unit is going to have to get broken up, and there's only going to be fragments of it on the floor. And the Aces had to do that, especially operate without Chelsea Gray, and then obviously with having Candace Parker retire prior to the season, that leaves a little bit of a hole for them in terms of their rotation. So where they're going to be at their weakest is when that starting lineup breaks up, and that's where the Mercury were able to take full advantage. You look at Suge Sutton knocking down 3-pointers and putting a lot of pressure on the paint, the rim, playmaking, causing some havoc on defense, doing all of that stuff that she needs to behind, but also when she's sharing the floor with Natasha Cloud to kind of just give a change of pace and a change of feel. You talked about Morgan Birch. Sophie Cunningham getting into it with Jackie Young, bringing that edge, bringing that competitive motor to the game, knocking down some threes, making some layups, playing some defense, showing some timely help on defense, especially with the defensive tactics they were using. Like, you talk about all of these little things adding up. Those things matter. Kiki had some decent moments in the game as well off the bench yesterday. Everybody was up to the task.
And we all, on top of that, we had 13 rebounds off the bench. I mean, everything they could put together for us off the bench, they absolutely did. And again, just a huge difference maker in the game. I don't think that the Phoenix Mercury are able to pull this win out without Suge and Sophie. And also, before I forget, another huge shout out to Liz Dixon, because she also hung herself in there defensively yesterday. I think that Nate put them in positions to maybe struggle a little bit on the defense, and they did not. They were not scared of anything. They attacked their matchup, and above all else, like I think they were able to hold their own against, again, the defensive player of the year, A'ja Wilson.
Yep. And in addition to the defensive player of the year, A'ja Wilson, also off a roster, the most prolific offense that's been put together. And for that offense to still be as prolific as it is, even without its puppet master and Chelsea Gray, that just speaks to the compilation of talent they have. And you speaking to the Liz Dixon point, plus or minus is obviously not everything, but she led the team in plus or minus yesterday. She had the best plus or minus in the game. The team was 18 points better with her on the floor. And I think that just speaks to just how consistently she was just doing her job. She didn't do anything, ridiculous or highlight worthy, but just doing your job. There's a lot of value in having a bunch of role players that can simply do their job, whatever that job may be, based off of who the opponent is. And again, everybody was up to the task that played in Nate's rotation yesterday.
All right, we're gonna get into I see a comment from James Casillas talking about Miss Kahleah Copper, so I want to make sure we get to that in a timely manner. Yes, I think I even downplayed the trade for Kahleah Copper a little bit. Okay, if you would have asked me in April how I felt about it, I was a little bitter because I really wanted that draft pick. But now, here we are, a month and a half later, and Kahleah Copper is our leading scorer and will probably maintain our that leading scorer position throughout the end of the season, and is easily leading the MVP conversation at the moment.
Kahleah Copper is the best player in the WNBA at this moment in time. And for a lot of Mercury fans, I think if you weren't watching the games closely in the 2021 WNBA Finals, you might not necessarily, you might know of Kai being a player that can dominate and that can be a top 10, it can be a top 5 player, it can be a top 3 player on any given night, but you might not necessarily have known the level of prolificity that resides in her game. I think context-wise, you can't draw up a better situation for her to be in. She's got a ton of shooters around her. She has players that can play make around her. She has players with a certain level of IQ that help to play to her strengths, but also open things up for her. They understand how to open up lanes for her to drive. And she has a coach that understands how to use her as a chess piece to move around the board on the offensive side of the floor to optimize all of the skills and free her up and make her scoring opportunities a little bit more easy. She's just in a perfect situation for the things around her to accentuate all that she does. And in addition to her being at the top of her game at the moment in time as well. I mean, look no further than the Phoenix Mercury having the best offensive rating in the WNBA when she's on the floor at a 112 rating. That is astronomical on the women's side of things. And you just look at how she's going about being featured in the offense. Nate's not just giving her the ball instead of telling everybody to space out. She's getting it off of movement. They're being real subtle with matchup hunting, so where she's getting an advantageous matchup to then attack, which either leads to a double team coming, which she's shown the ability to read, get a beat on, and make a pass to keep an advantage. Obviously, getting to the free throw line ad nauseum and just generally scoring for herself even before the fouls that are inevitable to come with the pressure that she puts on defenses. Again, she just couldn't be in a better situation. And I think Nate is really optimizing everything that is Kahleah Copper as a weapon already at this early portion of the regular season.
Absolutely. I think Nate Tibbetts has bought into Kahleah Copper as much as Kahleah Copper has bought into him, and I think you can see it every time. I watched for it in the last 3 minutes of the game yesterday, how you said that Nate is going to go to Kahleah in the times to put the game away, and that is exactly what he did. He put the ball in Kahleah's hands and made sure that she was the one to facilitate the play, whether she was scoring or making sure someone else was scoring, she was getting it done on the offensive end of the court for Nate yesterday.
Yep. And it felt so natural. Like, especially again, we talk about it, so much newness. They're not having the level of reps to make things seem seamless in terms of the things that they're trying to put forth onto the court. It felt very natural the way they were going about putting Kahleah in positions to attack. They were very organized in their attack, and you could see by the results that they didn't just win off of talent in that game against the Las Vegas Aces yesterday. They won off of talent as well as execution. And when you're able to marry those two specific portions of your attack into one blend, that's where this team is going to be optimized. Not just being a talent piece and not just being them being able to execute, but putting both of those things together, doing it in a sustained manner. And we saw the results that they got yesterday. They were able to execute on both sides of the floor more than the Aces were. And we saw them garner a double-digit lead in the third quarter, or in the second quarter, rather, and then ultimately regain that lead back in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Kahleah Copper took a control of the game exactly when I would imagine that Nate Tibbetts asked her to. And so, again, I don't think there's anything more you can ask from your leading scorer in a time when you're playing the best team in the league. And I think, you know, you spoke to talent and efficiency, but I think above all else, something I wanted to point back to yet last night was the Aces did not put forward their best effort last night. They did not even look like they wanted to win the game. And I think that that is not something I've seen from the Mercury a single second of the season so far. I know we're only 3 games in, but every game they've come out with the intention of winning and don't accept less. And it goes back to that first game in Las Vegas when they said no moral victories, and now look how it made out for them now.
Yep. And I think that's something, like, looking at the Aces. Becky Hammond, first of all, was not happy yesterday. Clearly, it's understandably so that why she wasn't happy. But I think even past that, she's not gonna give more credit to the Mercury than she's gonna give credit to her team for not performing to the level that they desire for their players to play to and for them to execute to. Naturally, of course, like, that's completely understandable. But again, in just watching the game, I feel like it was the Mercury that really put the Aces in situations that they just couldn't be successful in, or couldn't be successful to the extent that they're comfortable with or used to. And that's not something you can say about many teams, especially doing so on the Aces home court. They lost one home game all of last season. Like, that's not a place that you go into and you dominate like that. That's a team that has a lot of pride, and has a lot of pride not just from the players, but from the fans, that make for the most unique home court advantage in all of women's basketball. So to see again the Mercury at this early juncture of the regular season, literally the third game, the 5th game they played together in the third game of the regular season, do what they did at that specific arena, it really says a lot about where they're at. And I'm just thoroughly impressed.
Absolutely. You know, I think that Nate has this team bought in and firing on all cylinders very early. And I hate to talk about my fears about this team, but that is definitely something that I'm fearing early in the season, is that they're almost peaking too early. You know, we're 3 games in and they're beating the Aces on their home court. And while I'm enthralled, I fear that they might get winded. And so I'm really, really stoked that there's the Olympic break to kind of break all this up this year so that they can be successful early in the season and we can get the same fresh team back late in the season as well.
And I think that's a good point to think about. I personally don't feel like they're peaking quite yet, just because, BG is not in the mix yet. Sophie hasn't really hit her stride. Natasha hasn't really hit her stride. DT's in cruise control. Rebecca hasn't really hit her stride. I think right now they're winning off of Kahleah Copper just being, like I said, the best player in the WNBA right now, and also off of the team's execution. But I don't feel like all of their pieces are clicking in unison at the same time. And I think that's what makes this team scary, actually, projecting forward more than them hitting their peak too soon, just by my personal observation. I feel like they're in a great space right now. And again, for these pieces to be laid at their foundation really speaks to what they can be once we get to games 34, 35, 36, game 40 of the regular season heading into the playoffs.
All right. Well, we spoke a little bit about it, but I do need to make sure that we verbalize that Kahleah Copper is the only player in WNBA history to ever have back-to-back 37-point appearances. Now, listen, against the Dream, it was impressive. I was stoked after the game was over. That was the first time I've ever seen 38 dropped in person. I mean, what did I not have to be blessed about? But then she comes back, and what did I say on Monday? I said, I don't expect, anything crazy. I don't expect them putting up all these threes. And here she goes, proving me exactly wrong. And she came out just as hot and heavy. And at some point, I'm like, are we going for 40 every game? Like, is that what we're doing? Because if so, just let me know and I'll keep the 40 tracker on lock. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. She's just an amazing talent. I really did my best to kind of preface this in our very first episode, just because understanding the context of the team that she's working in and how both the context as well as her style of play marry and play off of each other so well that makes it just extremely conducive for a winning environment. I mean, 75 points through 2 games. Like she's a mercurial special talent. And she's averaging 37.5 over the last 2 games, and she's shooting 60.5% from the field. Insane. And just kind of looking at things from a historical context, per Basketball Reference, she is only the 5th player in WNBA history to compile 2 or more games over the course of their career, scoring 37 or more points while shooting 65% or better from the field. Like I said, she's the 5th player in WNBA history to do so multiple times. The other 4 players to do so, Cynthia Cooper, she did it twice. Asia Wilson's done it 3 times. Liz Cambage did it 3 times. And Breanna Stewart's done it 5 times. Very exclusive company that she's just etching her name into different historical lists with. And this is a space that she's more than capable of visiting and revisiting multiple times over the course of the rest of the regular season, based off of her usage and the way she's being functioned into everything that Nate Tibbetts is desiring to do on offense and the pieces around her. I think, again, it's just a perfect situation for her. She couldn't be in a better situation. And we're already seeing that kind of play out in game 3. It's literally only game 3 of the regular season. And we're seeing these just one of a kind type of performances. She's already thrusting her name into all of the MVP conversations, and she's at the top of that list right now.
Yesterday at about 11 a.m., I saw a tweet that said Asia, Erika, Nafisa, and Alyssa Thomas were in the MVP conversation. And I was like, you know what? That's a fair conversation. By 8 p.m., that person had edited the tweet to add Kahleah Copper's name into the tweet. So the eyes are opening to her, and the Mercury is going to be a team that the WNBA teams as a whole start circling on their schedule as to be a scary game.
Yes, you're going to have to bring your A game. You're going to have to compete because Lord knows, the Mercury are going to compete regardless of what it might look like, regardless of what the situation might be as far as injury adversity. This team is going to have a level of competing, a level of competition as a bar that's going to be a lot higher than most teams' ceiling. So that means you're going to have to reach that much further over the course of some of the mundaneness that comes over 40 games to match them. If you don't match it, you will get beat. You will get beat, and it won't be pretty. So that's like a threat to a lot of teams because you have to match that. And just looking at where this team is, that's where you want to be, especially this early in the regular season.
Absolutely. Now, I do want to get back to the bench for a second because I took a look at some stats right now, and sorry if I'm looking off to the side, but I want to give a very, very special shout out to Natasha Mack of the Phoenix Mercury, who is 5th in the league in blocks at 2.3 per game. She is behind none other than Asia Wilson. Okay, so all I'm saying is I think that that the Mercury may or may not have, prepared better than we had anticipated for the Brittany Griner absence.
That, and I think also, again, before I give credit and show attention to anybody independent of Natasha, I want to make sure we give her flowers. The more than deserving is an understatement. Like you mentioned, fifth in blocks, 2.3 per game, and also second in offensive rebound percentage. So rebounding percentage meaning the percentage of misses that a player is grabbing while they're on the floor. Natasha's grabbing 19% of the misses, the offensive misses. 19%. That number that's astronomically like all-time great type of high. Obviously small sample size, so we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. But again, when you put a player you throwing a player into the Lions Den for really their first meaningful minutes over the course of their WNBA career, you're not expecting these type of loud box score impact type of numbers to be given again from a player that you brought onto the roster to be a reserve and to really fulfill like a 10 to 12 minutes per game type of role. Nothing more than 12 minutes for sure, especially when Brittany Griner's in the mix. So seeing Natasha perform to the extent that she is early in the season like this, and to have this impact again going against Asia Wilson in the very first game, then against Cheyenne Parker and Tina Charles in game 2, and then Asia Wilson again in game 3, and to have these type of numbers again, obviously you're not expecting for it to be sustained in this capacity, but even half of this in her role, tempered down into the role that the team brought her into play when Brittany comes back, it's going to be a major plus in the minutes that Brittany Griner is spending when she's resting, or God forbid she gets injured again. Like to just have to know that that's something that you can bank on really speaks to where the team is as a whole, because the player is not going to jump out and perform to this extent if they're not being insulated and used to the extent that they can be to their strengths. And we're seeing that, and we're seeing, like you said in the opening, everybody's bought into Nate Tibbetts and his system, and the system's buying into Nate as well in turn, and it's playing off of each other, and it's making for a team that's certainly starting to stamp an identity of sorts through this first quarter of the regular season.
I think, like Matthew in the comments said, Mac and BG in the paint and as a combo when BG does return could be an absolute game changer. And I think you see this team have a lot more opportunities to change up on matchups when Brittany Griner is obviously back. You got a lot more size to play with, and so I think the duo between Mac and BG could be really interesting to see on the floor as well.
If Natasha Mack keeps up this level of play, like we talked about with the blocks, the offensive rebounding percentage, the general presence on the glass and in the paint, if the Mercury are able to get this type of impact and value when Brittany is resting, that might make for one of the 5 or 6, one of the top half of the league center rotation. Talking about tandems when one is off the floor, the other one's on, and the other one is on, the other one is off. To have that stretched over the course of 48 minutes, again, if Natasha's able to sustain even half of what she's doing right now, when Brittany comes back, that changes a lot. Because honestly, we talked about it in our first episode. We talked about it on the season preview episode 2. One of the things that I was quote unquote worried about with the team was how the center minutes behind Brittany Griner will look in case of emergency with injury, but also just generally when you get into the rotations over the course of games, or God forbid Brittany gets in foul trouble, things like that, different types of adversities. That quote unquote worry has quickly diminished over these first 3 games. I talked about after the first game how even though the Mercury lost that game and Asia had what she had in the first quarter and generally in that game, I was thoroughly impressed with the composure from Natasha Mack, the disposition that she had on both sides of the floor. She's just very much doing her job. And regardless of the results that might come with, she's doing her job, and that's all you can ask for in her role. Now, 2 games after that, I'm very, very comfortable saying that the Mercury might have something that they didn't necessarily anticipate having in Natasha Mack. And that says a lot projecting forward for where this team could potentially be.
I'm more so worried about teams calling the Mercury saying we need her than anything else. I'm like, please don't trade that poor girl. Please keep her where she is in Phoenix. Well, I do have some very, very exciting news today, and I hope Jacob Franklin, who's behind the screen producing for us today, I really hope he's got some graphics ready for us because we and by we, I mean Saul officially gave us the news about the takeovers for the Phoenix Mercury this year, and I'm pretty excited about them. So the first Mercury takeover is going to be June 13th against the Las Vegas Aces. Oh my God, Jacob Franklin's yelling at me in the chat.
Well, to kind of put a pause on that, you already kind of the rabbits out of the hat on the first one.
Yeah.
But for our beloved Mercury fans, first of all, definitely give us this like while we're in this little intermission. Now that that's out the way, we got the business side done. We've all watched these first two games between the Mercury and the Aces. We've all been thoroughly entertained and left with plenty of things to talk about. Now, this next time they come through to play against the Mercury is going to be at the Footprint Center. And for that game to be a takeover game is a gift to anybody that enjoys basketball in any capacity. So again, shout out Saul. That's big time. That is Diana Taurasi coming through in the clutch in the WNBA finals type of clutch for all of the fans. That's a lot of love being shown. Get out there to that game. Get to that game. If again we get half of as competitive a game that we saw last night, or even in the first game, it's gonna be something that's a game that you're gonna be able to timestamp in terms of your life and always revisit off of memory, and that you'll be able to tell friends and family, etc., that they need to get out to a WNBA game regardless of who's playing, because that's the high level of competition we saw in just a game 3 of the regular season last night.
Listen, we just got a comment from Mr. Mike Luke, who hosts the Wildcat Show, and he says we should have hashtag Copper State shirts. Listen, I think that Mike just may have hit a nail on the head for the Mercury podcast. He said he would buy one. I'm time stamping this. We're gonna clip this right now. Mike is buying a Mercury shirt, but it has to be the hashtag Copper State shirt. So this is gonna be great. I'm super amped about that. All right. But also there is a second takeover. So, and this one I'm equally as excited about. Listen, I don't think you guys can fathom how amped I am for these. I have to sit in the media row and listen, it's exciting. I'm thrilled. I got the best seats in the house, but I have to sit there with my toes down and my hands on my computer looking like this, like I'm just doing my job. And y'all, I'm not like that. I'm trying to go crazy. So that being said, get to these takeovers. Like I said, first one's on June 13th against Las Vegas Aces. Second one's on August 26th versus the New York Liberty. Both are going to be a grand old yeehaw hoot of a time. Like, I don't think you guys can even understand how excited I am about this. So if you're not planning to come now, you are now. Put it in your calendar right this second. Mike, I need you to put it in your calendar. Gringo Billy, Marvin, everybody put it on your calendar right now.
Yeah, having these two games against the Mercury, against the Liberty, and the Aces, of all the teams that you could possibly have in takeover games against, that's stamped as something that's going to be of the highest level of entertainment. You're getting to see some of the best talents in the world. You're going to see anywhere from 4 to 8 separate Team USA representatives between the two teams in both of those games. That is just it's an astronomical level of talent, including other all-time greats that might not necessarily be Olympic level anymore, like Courtney Vandersloot, but somebody that's going to be a player that's going to be very much entertaining. This, like, you take advantage, and while you're at it, definitely give a salute to Saul, because they hit a home run. They hit a grand slam in the ninth inning, the bottom of the ninth inning, grand slam, bottom of the ninth inning, 2 outs, and you're down 3. And they hit a grand slam.
For real, yeah.
Walked us off in grand fashion with these two takeover games. They couldn't have did a better job. And again, this just shows the level of attention to detail that is really should be valued from anybody that, taps in with us at PHNX. So shout out to the supporters. Do all of these things for you all to make it more fun to be a fan of these teams that we cover. And there's no better indicator than these two games being isolated for you all to tap in with us with. And I'm looking forward to these opportunities for you all.
Absolutely. Mike Luke I need to tell you guys this. He just tweeted out that he just found out that the Mercury has the best player in the WNBA. And I think we have converted him into a Mercury fan now. So hats off to both of us for that.
And hats off to Kahleah Copper before either one of us two, because she the one that's doing all this heavy lifting. Kai, she is capital, all caps, her. capital DAWG, all of that stuff. And also one of the more marketable players in the WNBA off of personality shown off the floor, but also on the floor, because she plays such a heart-charging, emotions on my sleeve type of game and really engages with the crowd, whether she's at home and she's ingratiating herself with the crowd and the fans, or on the road and throwing up the threes and letting the crowd know, like, y'all can't stop me right now. And whatever y'all do is just not working. Find something else. Like, she has that and then some, and there's a certain level of gravity and marketability that comes with that. And Kahleah Copper is just her. She's her.
She really is. All right. Now we're moving on to a little bit of a preview for the next couple of days for the Mercury, because they do definitely have a pretty fun schedule looking ahead. The Mercury host the Washington Mystics tomorrow. That is Thursday, May 23rd. I'm like, I don't even know what day it is right now. Saul is asking right now if Stephen would come to the takeovers. He needs a visual confirmation, yes or no, of if you would come to the takeovers.
What kind of question is that? You asking me if I would come watch basketball? Like, I'm offended that Saul, who knows me fairly well now, would ever ask me such a crazy question, asking me would I come to watch basketball. Absolutely, I would.
And he gets to do it with his on-screen bestie, Saul. I think that was a little bit of an ignorant question.
Come on, Saul knows me better than that, thinking I would turn down some opportunity to come watch basketball. He already knows what time it is.
Okay. Anyways, back to basketball. So the Mercury are hosting Natasha Cloud's ex-team, the Washington Mystics, tomorrow on Wednesday, May 23rd. And I think it's going to be a pretty exciting matchup. Any immediate, keys that you have to this game, Stephen?
Yes. Natasha Mack is again being thrown into the fire. So we talked about who she's gone against in the first 3 games. This very next game, up-and-coming talent in Shakira Austin is coming through that brings the same level of energy, the same level of versatility, and a similar stature. And it's gonna be fun to watch those two match up with each other and see, who gets the best of who over multiple windows over the course of the game. For everything that Natasha brings in shot blocking and defensive versatility and rebounding, Shakira brings that same energy and maybe even a little bit more with their athleticism to everything that the Washington Mystics do. So it's going to be fun watching those two go back and forth. It's going to be fun. It's always fun watching Ariel Atkins and Kahleah Copper go at it on the wings. It's also going to be fun if Brittany Sykes, who I think is questionable to return tomorrow, if you want to double check that while I'm speaking, I think I saw that she was questionable before we started the pod. If she does play, it's going to be fun watching Brittany Sykes going up against either Diana Taurasi or her former teammate in Natasha Cloud. Those are 3 dogs, capital D dogs. Brittany Sykes is, for my money, the best perimeter defender in women's basketball, and just absolutely dog it at the point of attack. So seeing everything that they have to, go through with her being used as a chess piece for Tebow and his defensive principles and everything, and all the schemes that they'll want to throw forth, is going to be fun. So there's a lot of little matchups over the course of that game to look for. But I think it'll be a fun one. I think that's one that the Mercury will obviously be up for back at home in front of the footprints in the crowd. And I think it's one that they'll go and get as well, riding off of the momentum from their win on the road against the Las Vegas Aces. And it's 2-game win streak that they're riding in addition to that.
I definitely think that this game provides a really good opportunity, another really good opportunity for Natasha Mack as well, being that the Washington Mystics signed Stephanie Dolson in the offseason. I think that was a really good offseason acquisition for them.
Big Mama Steph.
Yes.
Big Mama Steph.
And listen, I think that New York did my girl Steph dirty, and so they did not play her enough minutes, and I think Steph is really good in the W, and so I'm really, really excited to watch Natasha and her kind of go at it, and Liz Dixon while we're at it. I think Liz Dixon and Natasha Mack against Big Mama Steph and also Aaliyah Edwards is going to make for a hugely fun game.
Yes, and Maisha, you can add Maisha Hines-Allen to that mix as well. A bunch of just scrappy players that bring their lunch pail to every game. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be nice and muddy in that paint. It's gonna be a grown women basketball game in that rectangle sitting in the middle of the court.
I also have a big note that I expect a decent game from Ariel Atkins. She's coming off of a kind of a bad game against, I think they played LA last, and she only scored like 9 points or something like that, which is very uncharacteristic of her. So I definitely have it scheduled for her to kind of go off a little bit in this game. I said at least 15 points, and I definitely think that 15 is almost underdoing it a little bit. I think that she's kind of gonna not go crazy, but I think that because she had a really bad game in this last game, I think she kind of shows out.
Well, I think with the context that I'm about to provide now, that I saw that hour ago, Brittany Sykes was confirmed to be out for Thursday's game. So excuse me for misspeaking on that. I think she was questionable earlier today. She was ruled out about an hour ago, from what I'm seeing from Underdog WNBA. So without Brittany Sykes, that makes the sledding for Ariel Atkins that much tougher. I think that's why she saw such a tough game going up against that guard group that the Los Angeles Sparks have to put forth defensively. And Kurt Miller being a defensive-minded coach that's known for his principles and for his teams being stout on that end of the floor. So that being said, I don't think Ariel Atkins is going to have any fun tomorrow, because you better believe that, first of all, before anything else, Natasha Cloud is going to know Ariel better than anybody else on the court. And Natasha, being, first of all, the dog that she is, but also the competitor that she is going to take advantage of all the attention that's going to be and all of the usage that's going to be in Ariel Atkins' hands. And she's probably going to take that matchup personally and probably take forth that matchup just off of the onset from the game and look to take Ariel out of it. And that's going to make for some fun back and forth, obviously, with the familiarity between the two between Natasha and Ariel and the entire Mystics team. It's going to be fun to see that, but I do think she's going to look to eliminate her early and not allow her to have any type of fun at the Footprint Center.
Absolutely. And to kind of fill in some questions you may have about the Mystics, they're coming off of an 0-4 start to the season after losing a very close game in LA. I think it was only by 2 or 3 points. It was definitely a single possession game, and it was right there for the Mystics, and they just missed it. And so I always expect, a little more out of teams after they lose a close one like that. So I still am going, the Mercury is going to stand on top at the end of this game. I'm going to say 93 to 84. What do you think?
Okay, I could definitely see that. To my point, speaking earlier in the pod about the Mercury looking to win games not just off of talent, but also combining execution with that. Any Tebow, and this is obviously the son of the legendary Mike Tebow, the son of they still have a lot of the same principles and identity pieces about them. This is a team that you're very much going to have to still execute on the beat. You're not just going to beat them with talent. So we talk about it being a great test, like you phrased it. I think it's going to be just that. You could look at the schedule and say, oh, this team's on 4. They might not necessarily bring it. They're without their starting point guard, XYZ, ABC. There's going to be a level of execution that this team's going to bring, if not on offense, most certainly on the defensive side. And that's going to be something that the Mercury are going to have to work through. And again, I think there's tests and there's points of growth to come through those opportunities. So I think it's a great game for them to do so. It's going to be fun to watch them go against this team, and I do think they come out with the win. I'll say they come out with a 2-possession win. Let's say it's going to be 90 to 82.
Okay,
or 83.
I like that.
90, 83.
I like that. And I only have on the rundown today that we're going to go through the games to the Wings, but since we're not going to be back on the pod in person until Thursday, we are going to give just a little prediction for every game until we'll see you guys again on Thursday. But I do have to address the dumbest comment we've gotten so far, and it's from Mr. Mike Luke asking me if Sue Bird is coming back. The answer is no, Mike.
That's funny. That's a random question, but that's funny. Shout out to legendary Sue Bird. One of the best point guards in all of basketball to ever grace the hardwood.
Listen, Mike, I appreciate the effort you're putting into learning, but I'm gonna have to get you coffee with you sometime this week, and we're gonna have to go into a little bit of the WNBA lore so you can understand, Mike.
There you go. Put them on.
Yeah, and she is busy owning the Storm. Like, I don't know what you wanted her to do. Like, she can't play anymore. She's busy. But on to the next. So after the Mercury play the Mystics tomorrow, they will take on the Wings on Saturday. Lucky me, I'll be at both games. If you see me, please say hi. But the Wings are coming off of a 1-2 start. They have 1 win and 1 loss against the Sky, and I think Stephen will be able to probably speak very, much on this about what win or loss those games for them. They're still operating without Satu Sabali, as well as Natasha Howard is now injured, and I definitely think that hurts their front court for obvious reasons. But that being said, they did sign Monique Billings to a hardship contract, who did just put up 20 points against the Dream on Tuesday.
Her former team.
Right. And I think I definitely took that a little personally for the Dream. You know, I think that Monique was like, I'm gonna put on for my city for real. But also the chat is asking Stephen, Mike wants to know your favorite Nip song before we sign off today. So I guess I'm supposed to ask you that.
That's a great question. It's hard to not say Victory Lap off the top of my head. That's the anthem. That's like superhero music for me. But also Ocean Views. Ocean Views is probably my second favorite Nip song. So shout out to the one and only Nip Hustle.
I feel like I'm about to age myself and say I'm gonna have to look those up when we're off the pod today.
I'll put you on. Don't worry about it.
Okay. Anyways, back to the Dream. They also have Erika Ogunbowale, who, mind you, is right behind Kahleah Copper in terms of leading scoring in the WNBA. She is averaging 28 points a game, and she is just coming off of a pretty heavy performance against the Dream as well. I did have it up, but now, of course, I've closed out that tab. So back to what I was saying earlier, though. You've watched them play the Sky twice now. What are your big takeaways about the Wings, and what should we expect to see from them on Saturday?
Well, whether you watch the games where the Wings went up against the Chicago Sky or not, you know that the Dallas Wings have an identity. And their identity outside of Arike, you do XYZ and ABC with the ball in your hands, be a superhero. The big identity point for that team is that they're going to dominate in the paint, and they're going to look to dominate on the glass with their front court. Like you talked about Natasha Howard, you talked about Satu Sabali not being in the rotation right now. But they still have Tierra McCowan and Kalani Brown. And those are two of the more imposing centers across the WNBA. If you're speaking to centers that a center room that is not involving Brittany Griner at the moment, those two players move furniture like no other combination of players in the WNBA. And for them to have that stretched over the course of 40 minutes gives them something to dictate with, regardless of what lineup constructs they might have on the floor over the course of a game. So looking for the Phoenix Mercury which we haven't spoken to enough by my personal opinion on this podcast, because there's been so much to talk about. But gang rebounding, like the Liberty have, I think six different players that are averaging north of 5 rebounds a game at the moment. And that's something in terms of gang rebounding that's an absolute non-negotiable when you're operating without Brittany Griner, for one, but even more so when you're going up against a team like the Dallas Wings, because they're going to have multiple presence on the glass, on the offensive boards and the defensive boards. And if you don't match that and teams are able to get extra possessions, you can see something like we saw that went to the advantage of the Mercury against the Aces last night, with Natasha Mack grabbing offensive rebound after offensive rebound, leading to three-point opportunities for Kahleah Copper. You can see that work against you with Kalani Brown and Tierra McCowan grabbing offensive rebounds, and now they're kicking it out to Erika Ogunbowale, who's getting wide open three-point opportunities. Best time to get three-point shots is off of offensive rebounds, is in transition, and they get tons of those. So being able to neutralize that as much as you can, it's going to be near impossible to win the rebounding matchup when you're operating without Brittany Griner against those two. But if you can chip in as much as you can with your guards, as you have already over the course of the last 2 games, that's going to be maybe the biggest way for them to really neutralize the identity that the Wings are going to try to stamp, in addition to the physicality that comes with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess I did do a disservice by not speaking to Miss Tierra McCowan, because she's on my fantasy team, so I don't know why I'm forgetting about her.
Big T.
I knew I was doing myself a good service by drafting her in my fantasy draft.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be an interesting matchup, and it kind of goes back to everything we've been talking about with Natasha Mack and Liz Dixon, and even Morgan Birch, and just giving them good opportunities to show out and earn their minutes for when Brittany Griner is back. This is a perfect opportunity to do so. So with that, though, what are your predictions for the score of this game, Stephen?
That's a tough one to gauge. I think I want to say it's going to be a higher scoring game. And I think it's going to be that because I think the Mercury, with the space that they're operating in defensively over the last 2 games, I think it's going to be a game where they're going to be able to do a lot of the things that they want to out on the perimeter. But the contrast for me comes with just thinking about that battle in the paint on the glass, and how is that going to go for the Mercury? I'm gonna say this is gonna be a little bit lower on the scoring spectrum, just because of the clashing of styles in a sense. This game is probably gonna be played in the 80s, and that might be slightly a little bit more to the favor of the Dallas Wings. But I do think that with the scoring and the shooting ability of the Mercury that we've seen over the last couple of games, I think that's something that they can kind of bridge the gap with a little bit, especially if they get enough stops and they can play in transition and get up and down the floor, make the game a little bit of a track meet in windows. I'm gonna say it's gonna be 88-80 Mercury. I'll give them the win in that one, but it's not gonna be the most pretty, just because of, like I talked about, everything that's gonna be happening in the paint in that game. It's gonna have a playoff type of feel, just because of how the Wings operate. But I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that matchup? Because that's a hard one to kind of parse through, especially without Brittany Griner.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say I'm happy that Satu's out, because I'm not. I think it's detrimental to the WNBA as a whole when great players aren't playing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a travesty that Satu is sitting right now. That being said, though, her and Natasha Howard being out definitely provides a great opportunity for this team to maybe beat a little bit of a beat down Wings team that's maybe just struggling to kind of feed into their identity a little bit early in the season. I last season, the Wings went far. They went to the semis in the playoffs. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep, they played the Las Vegas Aces.
And they got
Mm-hmm.
swept. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
They did. Okay. So I just want to make sure my memory serves me correctly. But during those games, they were very competitive games. They
Yes.
stuck in there in the rebound. They played just as physical of a style of basketball as you saw any other team in the WNBA play. I think the only team that maybe matched them in terms of physicality is maybe the Connecticut Sun or the Washington
Mm-hmm.
Mystics.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of those two teams, you could not name another basketball team that played with more physicality than the Dallas Wings. Their coaching is impeccable. I'm blanking on her name right now, but
Patricia Trammell. Mm-hmm.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
She is a wonderful coach. She coaches with intensity and purpose. And I think that is something that, like, when you're coaching in this league, you have to have. And when your mom used to tell you, like, walk with purpose in the grocery store when you were a little kid and you're walking too slow, that is Latricia through and through. Like, walk with purpose, do your job, put your head down and do your job. And so I think that this will definitely be, not to discredit the Mystics in any way, but I think this will definitely be the bigger uphill battle for the Mercury over the weekend. And I think that you're probably right about it being on the lower end of the scoring thing, in the 80s instead of the 90s. And so I think you're right. And I'm going to go 84 for the Mercury and 79 for the Wings.
I could definitely see that. And to your point, the best teams, or the teams that have the most consistent, sustained success in any walk of basketball, whether you're talking about high school, college, professionals, obviously even more so, the teams are going to take on the identity of their head coach in some capacity. Already starting to see a ton of that play out with Nate Tibbetts and his players, and the players and Nate really starting to, like you said, build up that familial type of bond. You see it with the Chicago Sky and Teresa Witherspoon. You see it with the Wings and Latricia Trammell. You see it in abundance with the Las Vegas Aces and Becky Hammond. I mean, dancing and like all of the little stuff that they do. You see it with Christy Size a little bit with the Indiana Fever. And you're just seeing it across the W with the teams that are seeing consistent success in any capacity. And I think this is for a team to be lumped in with this group of names and the coaches and players to be going back and forth like this in that capacity. It just really speaks to the league and the level of competition having risen so much over the last couple of seasons, and the parity that comes with that.
Okay, so all that being said, I'm pretty excited because Mr. Saul Bookman has gifted us a super chat. He and I saw a comment that said he paid to give himself a compliment, and I think that's pretty hilarious. Keep killing it. Love what you two are building. Great chemistry. It's like the person who put you two together knew something, and it's almost like he did.
It is almost like he did, especially pressing the buttons that he did and asking me if I want to come watch basketball. The audacity to do so in front of an audience. That was dope. That was a good one. That speaks to knowing your personnel he's got a little bit of Nate Tibbetts in him, and knowing his player personnel and playing to it. So shout out to Saul for that. We appreciate you.
Saul is the Natasha Cloud, the facilitator of PHNX. So power to him. Appreciate him. And before we get into my last little bit here, Mike Luke wants to know when's the next show. Listen, we have some unfortunate housekeeping news, and it's that Monday is a national holiday and it's Memorial Day, and we want you guys to go celebrate with you and your families and your kids and do all the things that we know you want to do anyways. So please go do that. Saul, why is the offer off the table? He's coming to the takeovers. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it is. Anyways, though, the next show will be next Thursday, May 30th, and we only have 4 games in between then and now. So we're just gonna go through them a little bit, and I'm gonna ask Stephen for a few thoughts and see what we think is gonna happen before the next time we see y'all next Thursday, May 30th. So we've talked about the Wings, we've talked about the Mystics, and then after that, it looks like the Mercury are off to visit the Connecticut Sun. Now, this is definitely an interesting matchup, and I'm going to kind of let you take the reins here on what you think is going to happen early in that game.
Woo is the first thing that comes to mind. The Connecticut Sun are on a tear right now. They are doing that team is special. That team is really special. And for them to have seen the head coaching change that they've seen over the last 2 years and still be able to adapt, and honestly, it feels like they haven't lost a step in their stride. They still have that type of dominance to where they remained the 3rd best league in the W last season, even with the head coaching change. And even with some player personnel changing in addition to all of that, losing some of their mainstays, but obviously retaining the likes of Brianna Jones, who got hurt with the Achilles injury in the middle of last season, is finally come back to start this season. It's good to see her back and healthy on the floor. Obviously, Dewana Bonner, who's no stranger to the Phoenix Mercury and fans, and Diana Taurasi, and all of the history that those two have together. Even more so than anybody else, though, the one and only Alyssa Thomas, one of the most unique basketball players in all of professional basketball, just quite literally doing everything at any given moment over a game. That's going to be a tough one. And it's such a clash in styles. Like, they're so defensive oriented, and they finally have a little bit more of the offense that they need to balance out what they desire to do. And the Mercury are still finding their way. That might be the most fun game, and that I know that's interesting to say after the game against the Aces from last night, but that might be the most intriguing game over the course of this first stretch of games through the first quarter. I would say that the Mercury will go ahead and win that game, though. They're just riding on a high right now. It's gonna be a game that demands, like I talked about with that Mystics game, not just the talent piece, but also the execution piece. I think they'll be up to the task. I think they're riding on a morale high, in addition to them just generally enjoying each other and having fun, like Kahleah Copper emphasized post-game, having fun, being in the presence of one another and enjoying their process. I think those things are all going to add up for them, and they're going to really start to stamp some league-wide of putting people on notice with these wins and just the general level of play that they're putting forth. Without Brittany Griner, again, you can't forget about Brittany. Don't forget about Brittany. I'm curious, what do you think about that game? Because there's so much to speak on with that matchup. These teams are very similar in a handful of different ways. What you got for that one?
I think I'm most pumped to see who Nate puts on Dejanay Carrington. Girl's been going crazy, and I think that is going to be the matchup that kind of is the deciding factor. I think the guards are really the deciding factor of that game, and who – some nights are just not your nights, and I think whoever's night it is the deciding factor of the game. I think, like you said, I'm still going with the Mercury. I think, like you said, and Gypsy Rose said, I'm on a high right now. I don't think the Mercury lose anytime soon, even to the Connecticut Sun. And so, even though I do think that they are the best team in the East right now, as it stands. So that being said, I still peg the Mercury to win the game, and I'm going to go 91-83 on that.
I think that one's gonna take on the look and feel of the game against the Dallas Wings to come over the weekend, where it's gonna be a little bit lower on the scoring spectrum, just because of the way that Stephanie White has that team buying into the defensive side of the ball. is going to really bog down the pace and the tempo of the game. It's going to be real half court oriented for the most part. I think that one's going to be in the 80s as well. It might even dip down into the 70s a little bit. I'm gonna say the Mercury win that one even closer than the game against the Wings. I think I said 88 to like 80 or 82 in that one. I'm gonna say 80, like 86 to 83 is gonna be that game against the Connecticut Sun. And I'm glad you mentioned Dejanay Carrington. I've talked so much about their front court because their front court is really special. I didn't really mention their guard group. Ty Harris is having a very solid season to start. You talked about Dejanay Carrington, probably the front runner for most improved player of the year at this present moment. I want to shout out Saban on Twitter. The homie Saban wrote a excellent piece just diving into everything that Dejanay has put forth over the course of this first handful of games, and primarily on the defensive side of the floor where her identity is stamped, but also her growth and skill development that she's shown on the offensive side. So I want to definitely, again, shout out Saban for that. I would definitely highly suggest any Mercury fans to tap in with that piece and check it out just to get an idea of what Dejanay's been doing multiple times against the one and only Caitlin Clark and just really making life not fun for her on the basketball court. I think it's something that everybody can learn from in that piece. So shout out to Savan for that. But I also want to shout out one of the more underrated pickups in free agency that the Connecticut Sun added, and Rachel Banham, a player that brings some three-point shooting, can do it off of movement, has a swagger and an edge to her that's not unlike in a more of a guard version of Rebecca Allen in a sense. Just somebody that can do so many different ancillary, connecting, secondary type of things that are really conducive and cohesive for a team that lacks shooting. Rachel's going to be an important piece for everything that they're doing, and I really like the team that they've put together to go under Stephanie White in her second season with them.
Absolutely. And just we've been going over for almost an hour now, so I'm trying to get us all out so you guys can get on about your evening. But we do have one more matchup that I do want to touch on before we go because we don't get to talk to you guys before it happens. And it's going to be a fun game. And it's May 29th and Mercury against the New York Liberty. And I kind of want to know what you're looking to see from the Mercury in that game.
Again, like I prefaced before that game, speaking to the Sun, woo. the New York Liberty are the team that they look like in the preseason is not the team that came out in the first game. Neither is the team that came out in the second or third or fourth game so far. The defense that they're playing, the string that they're operating on right now, that is something that if they're able to sustain the level of defense that they're putting forth right now through the entire 40 games and carry that into the playoffs, they're going to hit a lot different in the playoffs than they did last season. I think last season they got there off the strength of their offense. If they're able to have their defense catch up in any capacity with that offense, that's a juggernaut. That is just a bona fide team that's going to be hard to deal with. And I think, again, therein lies yet another unique test for the Phoenix Mercury. Obviously, they have the talent, and they might even have a bit of a talent advantage just because the Mercury will be operating without Brittany Griner for that game more than likely. So again, going back to the talent and execution piece, they're gonna have to execute against that team. Sandy Brondello, another piece that's across the W now that has ties to the Phoenix Mercury. Last championship appearance came with her on the sidelines, manning the sidelines. She has that team really bought into everything that she's desiring for them to do execution wise, in addition to the talent. So I'm going to be very curious watching to see, how that game plays out with everything going on the court from schemes and personnel and just seeing the general chess that's being played between both teams. That one's definitely going to be on the higher side. I think that'll be in the 90s. I think it's going to be a lot more comfortable to the pace that the Mercury and Nate Tibbetts is desiring to play at. High possessions, high three-point shooting volume, high transition play as well. I think that one will be, I'm going to say like 96 to 92. And I'm going to say the Mercury lose that game. But it's going to obviously be a close one, like I mentioned, by the score. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that one? Because I see the thought bubble over your head right now.
It's there. Truly, in my opinion, and now listen, I understand that the Liberty has one of the greatest basketball players of all time and Breanna Stewart on their team, and I will never deny that. That being said, the Liberty, if you ask me professionally, are not playing very good basketball right now. They are, to me, they lack cohesion. I was talking to Stephen about this in private the other day a little bit about how I feel that the Sparks are just 12 players that all happen to play basketball at the same time. And I kind of feel similarly about the Liberty, where they all kind of like each other and you can see it on the court, but they don't mesh that well, and they haven't now for a season and a half. And so all that being said, I think the only real matchup that the Mercury loses is the post play. I think Jonquel Jones is a dog. I've always thought that JJ is no joke, and the girl is just no to your shade. The girl's beefy. How are you supposed to combat with one of the largest humans in the league? You know, she is just yeah. So I think that is a huge matchup disadvantage that the Mercury have against the Liberty. But outside of that, I really don't feel very similarly about any of the other matchups in that game.
Yeah, I just think that team is on a mission. Having lost in the finals to undermanned Las Vegas Aces team. In addition to that, all the attention that came with them constructing that roster that they did in New York, and talking about the only team they were really focused on is getting the Aces, and then they get the Aces without Chelsea Gray, and all the other injuries they had, no Candace Parker, and they weren't able to handle their business, and they lost the championship on their home floor. On top of all of that, like, I think there's a certain type of edge that they're going to have. And for any team that's looking to contend, they're going to have a different type of energy going up against them. They obviously, like, it's abundantly obvious when Matt Ishbia pushed with all his efforts and investing in this team that they were looking to contend right away. So I think the Liberty are going to certainly look to kind of send a message, in a sense, to the Liberty are going to look to send a message to the Mercury. But I'm really curious to see what type of responses the Mercury are going to have, because not unlike that matchup with the Aces, there's going to be opportunities where it's going to be back and forth, and you're going to have to respond to something that your opponent is doing off of talent or execution. And it's going to be a great test nonetheless.
Those are some early games. We got those at 4 p.m., which I'm pretty excited about. It means I can go to sleep at a reasonable hour again. But before we go, I just have to read this comment from Saul because it actually is so funny. He says the Liberty are the Suns, and I don't think there's ever been a more accurate reading of the New York Liberty in my life. I think that is humorous, to say the least.
I wish Saul had a mic right now, because I would ask him what's the similarities between Sandy Brondello and Frank Vogel. But that's a conversation we can have in the group chat or something. But yeah, I like the comparison. If you talked about the Suns with Chris Paul and the Courtney Vandersloot comparison there, and the superstars that come after that and everything, it's definitely a conversation to be had there.
Okay, but actually, there is another thing that I was supposed to tell you before that, and it's actually that Saul did book your flight for the takeover.
Oh my goodness, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's go.
You'll be departing at 7:30, and you'll be going back at 5 p.m. the next day. So we get to spend a whole day together, Stephen. It's going to be a hoot.
Let's do it. Let's do it. We get to watch basketball at the same time, too. I'm all for it. Let's go. Let's go.
Saul's yelling at me. Tell Stephen his flight info. I'm sorry. I was trying to keep his travel schedule a little, privatized, Someone's going to show up at Phoenix International Airport looking to pick up Stephen early that morning.
Nah, I appreciate you, Saul. Gratitude for that. I'm looking forward to it. I really am.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. So again, please, pop over to gophnx.com, become a diehard. Listen, I have a blast in the diehard chat every single day. I wake up in the morning, it's the first thing I check. I go to bed at night, and it's the last thing I check. So if you're not in there, what are you doing? Because quite frankly, how else are you supposed to get a hold of Erika? So that being said, go to gophnx.com, get in that, and then also make sure you're booking your ticket to the takeover. Obviously, I'm going to be there. Steven's going to be there. Hell, maybe we even get Mike, Luke, and Saul to show up. And you know what? While we're at it, why don't we just throw Jacob Franklin in the mix too? Just have a whole PHNX field day at the Mercury game.
It's gonna be a fun time. Like I said, with everything going on the court, but also off the court, I'm definitely looking forward to these matchups even more so.
Absolutely. Well, since we won't get to see you guys until next Thursday, I do hope everyone has a wonderful week, a great weekend. I hope the Phoenix Mercury have a blast on their road trip. Be sure to give this video a big, as Jacob Franklin would say, smash that like button while you're here. Make sure you follow us. Give us a 5-star wherever you get your podcast. Oh, and make sure we get my brother, I guess, to the takeovers too. I guess he wants to come also. Said we buying flights. Sorry, John. I'm gonna have to put that one on the Discover card. But I'll book it right now. Anyways, I look forward to seeing y'all next week. Oh, one last thing though, Stephen, where can they find you on socials?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at StayTrue S.3 STAYTrueSDOT and the number 3. Always down to talk hoop. We got plenty of Mercury basketball to talk about, like we spoke on the podcast going forward. We'll know a lot about this team over the next 3 weeks or so. And hopefully in that window we get some great news about Brittany Griner as well. So keep an eye out on Twitter for all of the conversations being had, all the things talked about before games, during the games, after games, and let's talk hoop, man. Let's do it.
I want to give myself a little bit of a shovel in the back, if you will. I haven't been posting that many post-game presser clips, and so if you see me in the middle of the night on the PHNX Mercury posting, please just know I'm still sitting in the arena tweeting in the dark, okay? So I'm going to try to do a better job at getting them out faster for you guys. Make sure that you guys have access to that information so, you can see the vibes as well as we can. But until next Thursday, hit me up on Twitter at Erika Lee Day, and that is Erika with a K, by the way. Thank you, Jacob, for such a wonderful job producing the show today, and I can't wait to see you guys next Thursday. Thank you.
We all silly like the mayor.